Everyone makes mistakes, and that's true for creators. But mistakes aren't something that we should avoid or shun or feel bad about, and here's why. Mistakes and play are exactly the same. It's the trial and error that creates a happy accident that turns into the light bulb and changes society and the world forever after that. It's goofing around in a sense of fun that allows you to get a particular new insight, to connect two things that aren't necessarily similar, to make progress, make that viral video, make that book hit the New York Times bestseller that changes everything for yourself, for your family, and your community. So, some examples of this in the real world are Jay Klaus, who runs a business called Creator Science, that he built a community around experimentation. We have Brendan Burchard, who led the high performance movement and talks about how high performance is improving yourself steadily without impacting your health and relationships. And that's what play is. It's continuing to work on something and to make incremental improvements without losing that sense of joy. It's a YouTuber like Markiplier, who started being on YouTube because he wanted to make movies someday and has finally been able to do it through learning by doing, right? It's this sense of play that has changed it for all these creators. Because when we forget to play, that's when we become inflexible. When things don't go our way, we don't have the creative thing that we made blow up in the way that we want to, or we're miserable in the work, or we have a sense of perfectionism because it has to be just right. And that pressure we put upon ourselves causes stress, causes numerous amounts of redos or whatnot. And ultimately, if we don't address this sense of play or being allowed to try things and make mistakes, we end up quitting because we're not learning, we're not progressing, and it's not fun. So what if we were more playful in our creations? And this is really an episode about how do you feel about your work and how you relate to your work. In today's episode of Creators That Crush, we're going to talk about where high-performing creators spend 70% of their time. We're going to talk about, and I'll provide a story of a creative fan that you know and what they do with mistakes and trial and error. We'll have some takeaways from that story, and then I have a quick challenge for you, and then we'll wrap it up, okay? So, in case you don't know, this is the Creators That Crush podcast, the show that helps struggling content creators find and level up their performance. I am your host and certified high performance coach, Shawn Buttner. And ultimately, this show is combining my high performance coaching work, which is a process I'm certified in, with helping content creators going out there and putting their good out into the world in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's happy, in a way that can do it confidently. So I'm really excited to have you here right now. So jumping right into it. Most high-level creators, in my experience, spend at least 70% of their time goofing off. And what does that look like? It's playing around with new tools and technologies. So AI has been the big hit the last couple of years. So playing around with ChatGPT, with the numerous tools that are blindingly coming out every day to help make your life as a creator a little bit better. And, so it could be that. It could be playing around with a new type of graphics technology, or this presentation's done in Figma, which why isn't it Keynote? Why isn't it? It's just a Notion document like I was doing in some previous episodes. So if you're listening to this is also on YouTube. Just want to put that out there. But, I'm using Figma to help me talk through this idea for this episode. And it's just fun, right? So it's just playing around with different tools or techniques or formats like we're doing now. Could just be, where is the fun in your work, right? Sometimes, we'll get to the story where we talk about it with this particular famous band, but what was striking about the story, as you'll hear, is just how much fun they were having being each other's company, making each other laugh, doing silly things, but it translated into the work. And so that's why that's important. It could be stuff like running experiments. Like I mentioned, Jay Klaus and Creator Science, and he built his whole community around. So it's like 70% of his time in the community is them talking about how, things that they're trying in their creative businesses and their content creation, learnings they've had, and sharing those learnings. And that's super fun and engaging. Could just be trying new things, like things that maybe aren't super related, like um, years ago when Apple had those like candy colored Macs, they discovered how to do it by going into and might be misquoting this, but some type of plastic process that Apple was doing. They went, I think it was for the candy colored Macs, those big shell things. They went to candy factories to see how they mixed and made candy to make those colors for the plastic. So completely unrelated industry, some unique novel technologies they were able to bring and create and update the Mac lineup 10 years ago. Or, just having new experiences. Sometimes you go to a show, you go to a museum, you're out in your community, and you just encounter an idea that lights you on fire, right? Recently, my wife and I went to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and saw this exhibit that's been there for a while called The Visitors, which is this really cool, like audio, visual, music setup. I guess that's the theme of this episode secretly, but from this Icelandic band, and I'm going to mess up the guy's name, so I won't say it, but the exhibit's really cool because it's like 9 different screens. Each screen is a different room in this mansion, and each of the musicians is in the room playing their instrument, and it's just really cool. But it's a crazy experience that, got me thinking about how to make content for creators that crush. It's a very creative way of presenting music. So let's get into this famous band and how they spent 70% of their time. And as we're talking through this, I want you to be thinking about maybe how you can apply this to your creative endeavors. Okay. It's a story about the Beatles. I'm fascinated with how the creative process works. And so when Get Back, the documentary that was on Disney Plus, I believe, it's on the screen, I was super fascinated. And, the Beatles have a special place in my heart because it was my mom's favorite band / obsession. Like, I remember, when I was 5 or 6, going, waking up after going to bed, having to use the bathroom in our like small 2-bedroom apartment that we shared. And like, down the hallway, seeing my mom sitting, next to the stereo with those big, like headphone cans on with the curly wire plugged into the stereophone, just kind of whispering and singing Beatles songs because she didn't want to disturb the household because it's late at night. She was a night owl. And so, this music like burned into me. And so watching this documentary with my wife, Ashley, and it was amazing to see the process. So this show, in case you don't know, is documentary type footage that they took when they were recording the album Get Back, which is amazing. But main takeaways from this is you see that 70% of the time that they spent was just trying to make each other laugh, right? They had some stuff to work on. They had a rough schedule. It was really interesting. They had a very tight, like show up at like 8 or 10 in the morning and go to like 5 or whatever, 9 to 5 type thing. And they have toast ready for them when they got there and all that. And they would just sit in that structure. And so the time was bound in that particular way. But inside that time, when they were in the studio together, it's them singing like covering tons of different people's songs, right? They're working on an album, but they're playing other people's songs, just kind of warm up and get loose, get some ideas. And then, singing songs with funny voices and overall having a good time. Now, during this documentary, George Harrison quits the band, I think, in the middle of recording the album. And then they have to like switch from this studio, some cool lights, to the studio in where they ran their record company, which ultimately ends up with them playing on the roof, playing the album front to back in London on the roof of this. And the police come. It's really punk rock, super cool. This took them like 2 months, double the amount of time they thought they were going to need, but they got it right. And you can see like the structure and how things formed for a lot of the songs that became super popular. So highly recommend the documentary and just checking out the creative process. What I took away from this is that 70% of the time, the Beatles are goofing off. 20% of the time, they're actually doing the work, and 10% was half-written songs that they brought to the group to kind of work through. So 10% was preparation. But what does this mean for creators? And how can you crush it as a creator with this information in mind? I think we need to spend more time in play. And in that, there's not been a successful creator that I've studied that has not liked or had fun in some aspect of their business, right? The people that are doing it just for the cold cash of it tend to burn out and tend to quit. So they're not around, they're not there for a long time. So what is the fun in the work you do? They show up and do the work. They treat it like a profession, just like the Beatles did with the set time that they came in. I believe it was like something like 9 to 5. And then you show up and you do the work, even though it was kind of loose. You came in with loose ideas, so that you didn't have everything meticulously planned out, but they had the structure and framework for a lot of the things that would become really big, really big songs. And they were present in the moment, right? There were emotions that flared. There's George Harrison quit the band for a minute, and then they talked him down, and they came back, and they finished up the album and made some changes, and just were reacting to each other in the moment, which was really cool from a creative standpoint. So the question is, how much time are you spending each week playing as a creator? How are you testing out new ideas, experimenting, just finding the joy in the process of creating? Because I think it's not enough. And this might not be feasible for everyone, but I think it's a valuable question to ask yourself. What would happen if you spent 70% of your time goofing off in your creative business and showing off your personality or the things that you find funny about in the world? And I think that sense of levity is needed in the moment we're living through right now as I'm recording this. And it's just good for connecting, right? Part of me goofing off has been me fiddling with how do I present this podcast in a video format that seems more connected to who I am as a person, who Shawn is, right? And it's not because I'm like full of myself. That honestly, like, I could do this without showing my face and maybe with one of those robot voices, and I could feel good about doing that. I would, but I think part of me showing my face on YouTube is to prove to you I'm not an AI robot, and to not have that, hey, this is an AI robot voice talking through slides. Like, I don't think that's what we need in this moment. We need to trust that there's a human on the other side of the video, of the audio, of the speaker you're listening to this show from. So that's me, right? Goofing off. And so that's your homework this week, is to just think about, like, if you were to implement in your day-to-day life 70% more play, more exploring, more experimenting, more trial and error, what would you gain? What would you learn? And instead of making mistakes and just stopping dead in your tracks. If you need help finding the fun in your creative life, I want to let you know that I'm started a new program to test out this framework for content creators that combines this high performance studies with being a content creator. So you can sign up for a free 30-minute creator strategy session. What you do is you submit one of the big struggles you're having in your creative business right now, and we get on a call for 30 minutes. We just brainstorm, and I have some set habits and a process that I can use to help you get through that struggle and get on to the next phase. And that's really all I'm going after with that. So no pitches after that. No, hey, like sign up for my coaching. As me testing out this new process with you. So if you want to check that out and join the creator strategy session, just go to ShawnButtner.com, linked in the show notes, and you'll see a button there to sign up for the 30-minute session. Answer like 3 questions, schedule your call, and away we go. Okay? So with that, I hope you loved this episode of Creators That Crush. Again, I'm your host, Shawn Buttner. If you would, share this with 3 friends. And over here, to my right, there's a video about creative purpose statements that you might enjoy if you thought about having fun, knowing your purpose, and having clarity on that can also help you feel motivated. So I thought it might be related, so go check out that video there. Again, in the show notes too. And with that, we'll see you in the next episode of Creators That Crush.